So the first thing I'm going to do is make a new document. You guys are working with the letter size, so you'll just leave that. You want to change the orientation to landscape. And you do not want facing pages because you're not printing this out. You're just showing it on the screen. So that's something really important. Make sure you deselect facing pages. You don't necessarily need to add a bleed, but it is helpful, especially if you're going to have anything extending beyond the edges of your slide in your presentation. Sometimes if you don't have a bleed and you don't take that image all the way past the edge of the slide, you can still end up with like a weird white line where it doesn't go all the way to the edge. So I just kind of like to get into the habit of putting bleeds on everything, so whether it's digital or printed out, I kind of avoid that problem. So I'm going to go ahead and put a bleed in. So, like I mentioned with the books that you guys are working on, I would recommend starting with your interior pages, your portfolio pages, and then working your way to the section pages and the cover page. So for the A master, I'm going to start with that. And just so I know which master is for what, I'm going to rename this. So I just option clicked on the name of the master page, and under name, I'm going to put portfolio pages. And so this is just the one I'm going to start with. And I'm going to go ahead and set this up very similarly to the one that I just showed you. So the first thing I'll do is go to margins and columns and adjust the placement of the margins and columns. It's up to you whether or not you want images to go off the edge. Since you're trying to showcase the work, you probably won't want all of your images to go to the edge. You want some kind of padding between the image itself and the edge of the slide. So I wouldn't have zero margins on the top. I wouldn't have zero margins at all. I would have some kind of padding. But for mine, the bottom was a bit greater. So I'm going to increase this. I think 12 is pretty good. And I'm going to, I'll make the top one, well, to give myself more room, I'll leave that at 3, and I'll have the sides maybe at 4. And then I am going to just go ahead and add in columns. I'll go ahead and put in 4 and increase the gutter. I think it was about 1 P6 on my other one. So I've got that established. I'm also going to go ahead and define where the text is going to go. So on mine, I had a rule before the text started, so I'm just going to put a guide where that would start. And I'm also going to put a guide where I want the text to not go below. And I'll also put a guide for the left margin and the right margin. So when I'm drawing my text box, I know where everything should go. Then what I'll do, I'll take my text tool, and I'm just going to draw a box where I want the information to go. And one great thing about putting in text boxes in the master page is that you can set up rules for yourself. So for example, if I know I want the subhead to be a certain typeface and I want the description to be a certain typeface, I can just put in some placeholder text in the master page, and then when I go to my individual pages, I can use key commands to access those text boxes and just change the text without having to go and find the right fonts and everything. So, yeah.
Do the rules work if you put them in a master page? Do they work in all the pages?
So if you put a rule in the master page, it will show up on all of your pages that use that master. I can show you how you can move the guides. Anything that you put into a master page by default will be locked when you apply it to an actual page in your document. So you have to use a key command to be able to click and edit anything that's originally on the master page. So I'll talk more about that when I start putting in actual pages. So I'm just going to find some typefaces to use. So for my section info, I might use Rockwell in all caps maybe. So I've got to set up for the section name, and then maybe the description will be in Futura and a little bit smaller. And it's not in all caps. And I'm just going to adjust the lighting. So that's pretty much my setup for my portfolio pages. Before I actually go and make portfolio pages, I'm just going to go ahead and take this master page and use it to set up my subsequent section and cover pages. So to do that, I'm just going to right click on or go to the drop down menu when I have the master page selected and go to duplicate master spread. And so it'll give me an exact copy of the previous master page. And then I'm going to change this one to section page. And all I'm going to do with this one is just kind of move things around in terms of where they are horizontally on the page. I want to keep the same left and right margins that I had previously, but I'm just going to make the area where the text goes a bit smaller, move things up, and make the section text larger. So for that, I'm going to go to margins and columns and just change the margins. So maybe the bottom. And I'm really only going to pay attention to the top margin here, so I'll just leave that as is. And I'm just going to take this text box and drag it up to the top of that that new margin that I've made. And since my section name is in Rockwell extra bold on my portfolio pages, I'll do the same thing here. Just make it larger. And of course you guys would kern this and make it gorgeous. And I'm wondering, I might have some kind of background to put in here. Let's see. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think, I know I have the JPEG somewhere. Oh, that's okay. What I'll do instead is I'll just put a colored box behind it, and it serves the same kind of purpose. And you don't have to use color like I did. You don't have to have a different color for every section, but maybe really just by having this section page for each new section, it should be enough for us to, understand that it's a different section. So I'll make this blue, maybe change the tint. And I'll go to Object, Arrange, and send this to the back. And maybe I decide, okay, that blue, the black doesn't look so good on it, so I'm going to change the color of this to white. But now that I know that I'm working with this blue, maybe I go back to my portfolio page and change the section name to blue just so it stands out a little bit more. And I also forgot in this one to put the rule that I had before, so I'm going to put that in. Maybe I'll make this pretty thin. Maybe not. Okay, so I've got my section page, and I've got a portfolio page. I'm going to hide frame edges. And then to do the intro page or the cover page, I'm just going to duplicate the section page and just make a few changes so that it's a bit different. So once again, I'm going to select the master page, use the drop-down menu in the right corner, and go to duplicate master spread. So I get master C. I'm going to change this to cover page. And then I'm still going to use the same margins I had before. I think it works fine. But maybe I'll have my name in Futura. Obviously, since I'm making the type larger, I need to adjust the leading. So you can name this Typographic Design Review or Typographic Design Portfolio. And I don't know, maybe I do something a little bit different with this one. Maybe let's see. Maybe I'd make this more like a rectangle around the type. So maybe there's kind of a darker rectangle and an even lighter one behind it. I'm not saying I'm making the best design decisions right now either, so I'm kind of a little under pressure right now. I'll send this to back, So there's my cover page. And the main thing, I mean, just with the blank pages is that there's the same left margin. Everything else isn't really apparent right now in terms of the grid because I don't have any images in there. So now I'm ready to actually put everything together because I've got all of my master pages. So I think what you can actually do is just click on a master page and drag it into the document. So if you just want to quickly add a new page with a specific master, you just click it and drag it to the page menu. And this is already set up the way I need it, so I don't have to do anything to the cover page. The section page would be the next one, and obviously I need to change this. I want to start with the typographic design projects that we've done. So to get access to this, because right now it's locked, what you have to do is hold down Shift Command and then click, and then it unlocks the text box. So just remember Shift Command and then click on the text box or the object that you want to have access to, and then it'll be unlocked. And so I'm just going to change the section name. And then the next page will be the start of my portfolio. Bringing in images, just like I talked about with your books, you want to have a designated page for all of your images. So for the sake of demonstration, I've got most of my design work all organized by the project I was working on, so it's all kept in one area. And I need to make sure that that area stays the same so that as I'm working, nothing gets moved around and the links get disconnected. So let's say I want to bring in some images. I'm going to start with this one so I know where they are. And I'm just going to go ahead and insert some images in here. So I'll go to File and Place, and I'm going to go through and find my images. Oops. One thing that you could do is actually set up some of your files in Photoshop before you even get into InDesign. And that's one thing actually I'll go back and show you right now. I have this folder where I've taken all of these images and just gone ahead and formatted them so they all fit in a square. So if I've got multiple things that need to go together, they're already set up the same. In Photoshop, I actually have all of these in the same Photoshop document. And I think they're in this one. But by working with all of them in the same document, that means that the color adjustments, the size, everything is the same. So it stays a lot more consistent that way. Regardless, you should definitely be editing your images, unless they're completely digital, like they're just Illustrator, InDesign, or PDF files, and you never printed them out. If it's anything that's three-dimensional, like these books, those you would want to obviously photograph and adjust in Photoshop.
Solid wood.
This is wine.
So if we have something that's three-dimensional, would it be better to put in the digital image or like photograph it, like an album or like a CD case?
I always think it's better to see the finished product.
Okay.
But if you just can't get a good photograph, then obviously the digital file will have to suffice. But I like, as a designer, I want people to see that I have good craft and am actually thinking about how these would function in real life. So I think professionals, if you're going in for interviews, appreciate that too. So I would say, if you can, photograph it. And it's always better to just like take a whole day and set up your photography station and just photograph everything at once, or a certain time of day for like a couple or 3 days, just so everything is more consistent. Or if you've got a photography friend, just like plan on buying them pizza and see if they'll do it for you. But like all of these, I set up in our studio in grad school with some stuff we had on campus. So they're not the best images, but they work for what I need them to do.
I think also you can rent a camera.
Yeah, I mean that's what at our school you could rent them. So I imagine you guys could do the same. And we have a photo room with lights and backdrops and everything. So you just have to ask a professor or a lab assistant, and they should be able to let you in there. But this is the Photoshop file I was working with. So if you look at my layers over here, and I'm like hardcore into organization, so every single project that has its own slide is put into a folder. So if I need to look at the Wizard of Oz illustrations, I just click on that. If I go to open up the folder, I can see the individual illustrations and move them around. And I came up with a system for how these would work. So these illustrations were actually on watercolor paper, but they were all in different pieces of watercolor paper. So before I even got to this, I cropped each character out and put them onto one, put them into this document, and put a little drop shadow for a little pizzazz. But it just makes it a little bit easier. Something like this. This was originally like a PDF document. Or actually, no, this was an Illustrator file. But each one was a separate file or a separate artboard. I brought each one in and then put them together in this folder so that I could condense how much work I was showing on one page. So this is something you can do if you'd rather like keep everything super consistent. And what I could even do, if I'm using these for my images, I could place one of those in here, and so it seems a little bit seamless. I could change the background color of my portfolio section, if this will open. So let's say that I'm going to use that and I want the background to be that tan color that I have for those images. So I'm just going to go to my master page. I'm going to go to place. And I have to go back and find those images again, so bear with me. And when you go into Photoshop, since this is just digital, the images, they should be, you might want to go ahead and have them at least 8.5 inches high or 11 inches wide. So that way you can scale it down. And if you need to keep it larger, it's already at a pretty big size. But to keep your document size small, since you're not printing this out, just save your images at 72 dpi. So that way the file won't be super huge when you've got like 15 images in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring this in. And actually I'm not going to mess with the background, but if I wanted to, I could take another color block and maybe choose a color from the background image. And then have kind of a consistent background color. But for the photographic ones, it doesn't really look that great, so I'm just not going to do it. So I'm going to take this out because it's in the master page and I need to have these individualized. And just like I did with the section page, I'm going to hold down Shift, Command, and click to change the section name. So this was typographic design. And the name of this, I'm just going to put in the name of the book. And I'll put in the date. And then I'll just keep going. So go to place. And to show you guys how you would put in multiple images, I'll go to an individual file. Let's see. So you can choose multiple images to bring in at once. So in this case, I'm going to choose these 4 and go to Open. And when you bring in the document, there's a thumbnail of the image, but there's also a number in parentheses. The number in here is 4 because there's 4 images that I brought in. And all you have to do is click and drag to the size that you want it to be in your document. And it puts them in here. You can also just click and it puts it in at the full scale. But with this one, maybe I decide to have this image a little bit larger on the left side, and then over here have some of the smaller images. So I can play around with the layout a little bit so that I'm showing multiple images, but I'm still using the grid system I established. So I've got these 3 over here. I'll put that image there. And to keep the spacing consistent between this image and then the 3 over here, I'll actually move this over just so I can get the gutter correct. And then what I'll do is make sure these bottom images, or these images, line up with the top and the bottom of my larger image. And then you can use these alignment tools up here to help get the spacing between each of these smaller images to be consistent. So I'm going to choose those 3, and I can use these different alignment tools over here. You should also be able to go to Window and bring up the alignment to help with that as well. So what I want to use for this one is the distribute spacing, and I'm doing it across the vertical axis, so I'm going to choose distribute vertical space here at the bottom, and then it makes the space between each image the same. And I'll put this in here so I know where it is. And then what I can do is I can group all these images together, and you do that just by doing Command G. And I can move all of these images so that the center point of the group is centered within the slide frame. So everything is optically centered, even though some of the images are larger and some are smaller. And then just like I did with the other ones, I can select or unlock the text box from the master page and rename these. And I'll just do one more because we like odd numbers. So once again, file, place, look for the images you want to bring in, and I'll show this one because it's a different size. So I'll bring this in. I'll click and drag from the left corner to the right so it gets it where it needs to be. And you'll notice when I brought this in, it looks really pixelated. But like I mentioned before, if I go to View and Display Performance and High Quality Display, it'll show me what it's going to look like when everything's said and done. So for the sake of the program and to help prevent it from crashing and ruining your life, it just put it at typical display, which looks really crappy on screen, but it's just a quick representation of what the image will actually look like. Now one thing, I have this longer image, so it fits really nicely between the left and the right margin, but I want it to be vertically centered. So one thing that you can do with your guides is go to your master page and put in where the centers are going to be. So usually you'll have, with grids and guides, there'll be an option that says snap to guides. So that'll automatically start to put images right next to where you have your guides. If you do smart guides, then if I'm already trying to move something to the center of the page, it'll show me, hey, this is the center of the page, and I think this is where you want to put it. So that's something you might want to turn on as well. But if you're trying to figure out the center of a block like this, but you don't want to get out your calculator and figure out how many pica or inches it is, what I'll do is I'll just draw a rectangle. So I'll just draw a black rectangle the same size as the defined margins I've made. And you'll notice that as long as it's selected, you get these anchor points where the center of each side is. So what I'll do is I'll take a guide and I'll bring it down to the center. And since I have smart guides on, it'll just snap to the center point. So I just go there and drop it, and that's where the center is. So it's a lot easier than trying to figure out, okay, this margin starts at 3 pica and goes down to whatever, and trying to figure out the center that way. And I use the box convention all the time. Even if I need to figure out what the gutter is going to be, I know this gutter is 1 pica, 6 points. So I'll make a box to those dimensions. And then let's say I want to have, I want to make a gutter between 2 rows. I'll move that box to the middle line and then put a guide on the top and bottom of it. So now I've got a gutter for a row if I need 2 long pieces on one. So now I can go back to this image here, and since I have smart guides on, I can just move it to this center line I have, and it automatically just kind of snaps to that point. And so now that's perfectly centered. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this name like I did before. Whoops. So now I've got, you guys will obviously have a lot more images than this, but let's say this is my presentation and I'm ready to go. The first thing I'll do, actually while I was working on it, I should have just done a save so that I know where everything is. And some things I might want to do beforehand, just go to my links and see that all of my images are linked. Unlike having to go print this out, you don't necessarily need to embed anything unless you're going to take this file and move it to another computer. But like I mentioned before, as long as you've got your set folder and you don't move it, and you don't move your original file that you're working on, you shouldn't have any broken links. But if you know you're going to be moving stuff around a lot, then maybe you want to consider embedding your images or creating a packaged file like we did for printing. But since we're not printing this out, when you're done, you just have to make a PDF and that's it. So what I'll do from here is what I might do is just use package to check and make sure that all my images are in RGB. So that's correct. And one other thing I forgot to mention, with document setup, sometimes, I guess it's not in this one, maybe it's in other versions. Sometimes here you have you do have an option of changing it from print to RGB. We should have set this up for web so that everything is already in RGB. That's something I forgot to mention. So let me just open up a new document so you'll see what that's supposed to do. So when you're on new document and there's intent listed, you just want to put this to web. And it automatically puts stuff in pixels, which you don't want. You just, put it in pica or inches. But just make sure that the page size is letter, that the orientation is the way you want it, and so on and so forth. But what this does is it automatically changes everything to RGB. And then to change the rulers, you would go to InDesign, Preferences, and Units and Increments. And you can change those to inches or pica. And you probably want to change the text size too. You don't want to see that in pixels. So anyway, if you forget and you have it in print, it's fine because we're just going to save it out as a PDF for digital anyway. Unlike with print though, all of your images should be in RGB because they'll look the best. So I'm going to go back to this, and instead of going to print or package or print booklet, I'm going to go to export. And the format here is going to be different. We have been working with the print format. We're actually going to use interactive. So this is really important. When that comes up, you'll get this this box that allows you to choose which pages from your document are put into the PDF. I've got everything set up the way I want it to, so I'm just going to put the whole document in there. I like to always see my PDF after it's done saving, so I usually have this option selected to view after exporting. The other things you want to check for presentation, you can have it automatically open into full screen mode if you don't want to mess with that. And there should be, oh yeah, there's also this cool feature where you can change the page transitions. I don't know if you noticed with the PDF I showed you before, but the images faded from slide to slide. That's something you can set up in this export feature. So you've got different options. I wouldn't be too cutesy with this, but just to make some of this obvious, I'll choose one that I wouldn't typically choose. So I'll do dissolve. You can also make buttons and media and things. So especially if you're doing something for an iPad app, that's something that you could get into. I'm not going to get into it right now because there's no reason to do it, but you can make these PDFs very interactive. The next things you'll want to do, take a look at the JPEG quality. I usually do at least high so that you know your images look really good. And then as long as all of your images are at least 72 dpi, you can have your resolution at 72. If you would like super duper crisp images, no matter where it's shown, you could do 96 or 144. But since this is always going to be shown on a screen, there's no reason to do 300 dpi. It's just going to make your document huge, and it's completely unnecessary when you're not printing it out. So I think that's pretty much it for this. I'm just going to click OK. It might take longer to export depending on how many pages you have and how large your original images are. And then hopefully this will open up in Adobe. And I've got all my pages in here. To check what this would look like when it's larger, go to View and Full Screen mode. Command L is the really fast way to do it. And it'll show your whatever page you're looking at in full screen. And then you can see the transitions. Did you guys see that? So I don't know, this one's like a little bit too much. I like the fade one because it's more subtle. But sometimes it's nice to have a really subtle transition to show that it's not just a bunch of pages. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The one thing I'm noticing is that the images do look kind of crappy. So I might go back and save another one at a higher resolution. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back to my InDesign file, do export, and I'll just change maybe the JPEG quality to maximum and maybe the resolution to 144. Yeah, my images look a lot better with this. So The nice thing is it's pretty easy to just go back and save different versions. If you have restrictions, like you have to send a portfolio to a prospective employer, and they say my email doesn't accept more than 10 megabytes of attachments, then you might have to save it at 72 DPI to get the file size smaller. But, you know, like I just showed with my images here, it looks a lot better at 144. So, you know, that works best for me. But like I said previously, you don't need it at 300 DPI. It's just going to make it really huge and be kind of annoying when people try to open it and it's like 200 megabytes. Are there any questions about this?
Let's put process work on there.
No. No process work in this. It will just be finished projects. So all of your projects from type design, and then one, maybe two from other classes that you have. I wouldn't add a whole lot of extra work just because we've got like 40 students to look through. So try to keep it probably no more than 15, but I'm not sure how many images you guys will have from this class. I haven't really figured out. Yeah.
So it's specifically just type work.
It doesn't specifically have to, I mean, all of your work from this class obviously is type-based, but if you've got stuff from other classes that showcase your talents or your interests, then that's fine. I wouldn't put in like something that's completely unrelated, like a tackle box that you stencil painted on or something like that, because it's kind of like, okay, so what? You took a stencil and you spray painted it on your fishing box. If it's something that relates to what you do, for example, if you like to make illustrations, and that's something you want to incorporate into your designs, then that would be relevant. Maybe you paint. That could be relevant. Maybe you do a lot of woodworking and you are a really good craftsperson. That could be relevant. If you can find a way to connect it to your interest and your strengths, then it might be worthwhile. But if it's more just like a little side project that you throw in there because you feel like you need something else, probably don't need to put it in there. Any other questions? So let me get out of this.